Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ABM Answered, the quickfire demand gen and ABM video series, or as always, that's at least what we aim for. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Jen Lever, aka Demand Gen herself, who is the Senior Director of Demand Gen. I think we should, I'll stop trying to say Demand Gen, but yes, very fitting, at Rithum.
It's got a nice ring to it, though, Sam.
It does. Also, a notable mention is an executive committee member at ForgeX. So shout out Davis. We do love Davis.
Yes, we do.
But as we were discussing just before the call, I'm really excited for this because I first heard about Jen through Amber Bogey, who is not just one of my favorite ABMers, but just such a lovely, friendly, kind person and very knowledgeable. And the fact that Amber was raving about you, Jen, by default means I'm going to be raving about you. So as a starting point, if we're going to rewind, you've somewhat done it all, right? So from what I understand, you've worked agency side, you've worked in-house, and you were even crazy enough to kind of co-found and start your own marketing media startup for 4 years. So yeah, who are you and how did you end up in B2B marketing?
Yeah, no, I mean, you pretty much summed it up pretty well, Sam. So I've been in marketing probably 15 plus years at this point. So to your point, I've done everything from both the agency side, client side. I've worn every hat from, digital marketing to content creation to brand strategy, website strategy, you name it. I've had my hand in it. But honestly, as I was starting to progress my career forward and started getting more involved with B2B brands, I came across this concept of account-based marketing. And it's not necessarily a new concept, but it has absolutely evolved quite a bit over, I would say, the past 5, even 10 years, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with, businesses getting a lot tighter on their go-to-market motion and really trying to understand their ICP, their total addressable market. Within that addressable market, where are those sweet spots in terms of where we need to place our bets that will, yield the highest revenue for us as a company, right? That and also the evolution of tech and AI, right? And I think that has also helped expedite account-based marketing in this concept becoming more of the norm, and you're seeing it more and more incorporated into marketing teams beyond just kind of the traditional demand gen lens.
I love that. Under 3 minutes and we're already on to AI. This is superb. But yeah, no, we're gonna unpack a lot of this now. But just to run you quickly through the rules and the viewers through the rules. Jen, in this case, will be given a set of questions to respond to, all about account-based marketing and demand gen. The questions have previously come from data we collected at Mixed Reality Rooms, where 1,000 marketers had gone through and stated what their biggest struggles were. But as I like to say, Jen, now we're big time. I'm clearly joking. But we've taken previous guest questions and started to incorporate them into the mix. So are you ready for question 1?
I'm ready.
We really need to incorporate sound effects here, don't we? Right, question 1 came in from Sarab Sanghi at IGT Solutions, and he asked, what is the right time, or when is the right time for an organization to adopt an ABM approach? So it's a nice first question.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and a question that a lot of marketers are starting to ask themselves, and businesses are starting to ask themselves too, right? And I think that when the signal for me in terms of when it's the right time to incorporate an account-based approach is when you as a company are ready to move from volume to value, right? And when you're looking at, quality versus quantity. And I think that's where like the age-old debate around the MQL starts to come into play. But if you really think about it, and your sales cycles are long, they're complex, you have a lot of different people who are buying part of that buying committee, those deal sizes are quite high. You have to be very, very intentional and strategic about who those best fit customers are, right? Because it takes a lot of time and effort to get those deals across the finish line. And so ABM can really help you start to go deeper into those accounts versus going to market with a much broader, wider approach. And so the trigger could be anything between stagnant lead quality. We're not seeing a lot of inbound coming in, or the inbound that we are having come in isn't actually converting. There's too much noise in the funnel. There's misalignment between sales and marketing. So that account-based approach can really start to bridge the gap there. And again, focus, and I like to use the word focus everyone's efforts across both sales, marketing, and even CS when we're thinking about expansion and retention plays on the accounts that are going to bring the biggest value to your business, right? So, because again, you're investing serious resources and reaching out to those target accounts. So you're going to want tighter alignment. And that's really kind of that cue to say, hey, we need to start to look at things from a more granular, segmented level than this traditional, broader demand gen approach.
Volume to value. That's already slogan number one out of this episode, I think, that I love. Also, I think you make a really good point on when people or organizations think about ABM, it happened to me as well. When I first heard about it, I always think about net new, but you also mentioned like customer expansion. That's also a great place to start. And to kind of like jump on what you just said, I know they've been saying it's trending for a while now, but I really think there's going to be a surge in it as like we come out of this bull run of like aimlessly spending and investing in technology. ABM to me is basically good marketing, or a whole good go-to-market motion. And I think, now people are a bit more cautious. There is going to be more of a need for it now as well to go to to use your words, volume to value approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question 2 came from Matt Conway and Katie O'Neill. They kind of said the same question, so I've blended their questions together. And they asked, what is a simple way to explain to sales all the great work marketing has done without like overcomplicating it, or bragging, I guess, for that matter?
Yeah, and this was a lesson that I continued to learn throughout the course of my career, right? Because I think like whenever you first start to do ABM in whatever role or company that you might be in, you get very excited as a marketer because you can see the value that this will bring to the table. Your sales team is sometimes a little bit slower to adopt or, kind of get the buy-in, right? To really understand how this is going to impact both from a pipe gen perspective, but also, ultimately bookings and revenue. And so when I first started talking to sales teams about account-based or, just even general marketing campaigns that we're running, you want to get into the weeds because as a marketer, 9 times out of 10, you're very passionate about what you do. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into any sort of campaign launch or testing out, experimenting new channels and things of that nature. And so you want to be able to shout that from the rooftops. But the reality is that sales really doesn't care, right? Cares about what is going to help them move the needle forward in terms of creating qualified pipeline and ultimately close one revenue, right? And so I really had to kind of take a step back. And again, I learned a lot of this through experience working directly with sales from an account-based perspective and also sales leadership too, to really understand what is it that they care about? What is in it for them? And I think that if you start to position things like through that lens, then the light bulbs start to, turn on the sales side, right? But if you're going in there and you're saying, hey, we've launched all of these different tactics and we've made all of these, optimizations on, in Google Ads, or we've launched this new LinkedIn conversational campaign. They don't care, right? It's like, how are all of those things influencing the pipeline? How is it getting more qualified? How are we creating more qualified pipelines? So again, that value play versus volume play. How many accounts are engaged? How many meetings are being sourced by, being able to surface those accounts that are showing those buying readiness signals. And then ultimately, like, how can we start to package up some of those insights that we're getting from the marketing side to help them with their outreach, right? So I think that, making sure that you're really tailoring it to what is going to be relevant to that audience is key. We just launched something recently here called the Smarketing Scoop. And it's a bi-weekly digest of anything that is relevant coming out of marketing, whether it's new content, new slides for pitch decks, new sales collateral, account-based campaigns, whatever it might be that, again, is very relevant to sales. And so we started to circulate that out to make sure that we have visibility across the board. But again, it's very tailored to that particular audience. I also found that it's really helpful sometimes to just throw a couple of visuals together, right? Or dashboards or snapshots to show kind of the progression and the traction that you're creating versus it just being kind of this like verbal dialogue with sales, right? Because again, they're on calls all the time. They're in emails, back and forth. So how do you start to break through the noise with your target audience, which as a marketer, sales 9 times out of 10 is your target audience, to make sure that what you're putting in front of them really resonates and speaking their language, not ours.
It's almost like that one visual that you put in front of them should just be here's your commission check if you use these assets that I create for you, up and to the right. Solid answer, Jen. And I know you've kind of leaned into the next challenge, which is about creating meaningful content for our key accounts. So I actually put this question in. So I heard, I don't know how true it is, but like on some report that 70% of all the content marketing make doesn't get used by sales, and like 30% of the time, sales' time is like reworking marketing's content. But like, how do you go about creating content that gets used, or even repurposing existing content for key accounts? And yeah, when it comes to like distribution, wow, I'm like bundling 4 questions into one here. But yeah, how do you kind of identify what content works, and how do you get it out? How do you ship it?
Yeah. So, couple things there. One, not all content is created equal, right? And certain assets have a very particular can create a very particular impact depending on when you're using that asset throughout the buyer journey, right? So you want to think about it through the lens of the customer and what the customer is looking for at any stage as they're going through that journey, to really help inform them, educate them on, hey, there's a current pain point out here. We understand that there's a pain point. Here's how other people are solving for it, right? And then tailoring, the content to support to move them forward, right? Now, the content that you're using in marketing campaigns might not be the content that sales is using in their outreach or to help progress a deal forward. So again, really understanding what is working and what's not working, and gathering that anecdotal feedback from your sales teams is going to be very important for you to understand what do you need to curate next to help support them moving things forward on their side. I think the other thing too is, using the data and the intel that you have, the insights that you have across, your first party data in terms of engagement with marketing campaigns, with your website. If you have the luxury of having like an insight based tool and you can pull in some of that third party data, whether it's intent signals, what have you, use that to help kind of craft what that next asset should be. Another way that I go about this too is listening to sales calls. And again, that sales feedback. So not only hearing what the sales team is telling you, but really understanding what is the customer saying on those calls, whether it's a prospect or a current client, to know what are those pain points that they're trying to solve, so you can then again tailor it to best fit their needs and help them find the answer. Ultimately position your brand or your business as the go-to solution to solve for that.
That's a really interesting point, because I was going to ask a follow-on question. There's always like the chance, if you ask sales what do we need, they're going to give you whatever answer based on their personal opinions, but actually you kind of already answered the question by doing that research yourself into looking into the cool transcripts, maybe running them through AI. I don't know, like you could like group them together and kind of getting a better gauge that way. So the blending of both is really, really smart.
And even doing like additional third party research too, Sam, like, going on LinkedIn or going to where your customers interact the most and understand what sort of topics are resonating well with them. What are influencers in the space talking about? What's top of mind, right? And I think that as a marketer, we often play kind of, this detective investigator role, right? Where we're trying to piece together all of this data, all of this intel to craft a really compelling story. And you can't just look at things through one perspective. You've got to try to gather as much information to understand the bigger picture and the impact that you're trying to drive, again, to, push the needle forward.
I'm sure sales appreciate that as well. Like, you're coming with new ideas, like this is what we've researched. Does that resonate? As opposed to just saying what works, and like you're giving them kind of like some form of foundation to comment on to make their lives easier.
Right.
The question came in from Janelle Amos at Elevate Growth. She asked, what are the top 3 things you would prioritize today if you were building a marketing strategy from scratch? It's a great question.
Top 3, that's really hard. I think first and foremost, clarity on your ICP and personas, and not just marketing having clarity, but sales having clarity, leadership having clarity, CS, product, right? Everybody aligning around who your target audience is and who that ideal customer is that we actually want to bring on board. Without knowing that, and without knowing who you're targeting and why, nothing else is going to work. Or it's going to work, but it's going to be very ineffective, and you're going to waste a lot of money, time, and effort before you start to realize, actually, we need to really understand who our buyer is first. The second thing that I would prioritize would be revenue alignment. So not only alignment on ICP, but also making sure that we are all talking about the same language when it comes to tracking KPIs and success metrics, right? And part of that alignment is also the data quality and the reporting, and making sure that we have a very clear line of sight in terms of what we're deeming as a successful campaign or successful sales player initiative, right? And then the third thing, I think, kind of circling back to one of the other questions is, content with purpose. It's not just content for the sake of it. It's not just content to churn out a bunch of blogs to, help with SEO, which is important. And again, it has its place. But again, creating assets that really support the different stages that buyers are going to go through, and giving them the answers to the questions that they're looking for across that buyer journey to help answer some of those real objections or those challenges that they're facing internally. Again, if you can create that trust earlier on in the journey, you're going to be more likely to be considered as one of those top vendors when they actually get to the vendor selection process. It's about creating that trust first and foremost, and then making sure that you continue to follow them in the right ways and the right touch points with the right information as they move forward and become more sales ready.
That's a solid 3. No one's actually mentioned alignment on revenue as a top 3, and I think that's a really important one. The next question, the famous oxymoronic statement of personalization at scale. Everyone wants to scale their, well, I say everyone, leadership and stuff, want to scale their ABM campaigns. How can we distribute it across everyone? I know ForgeX, I think they released a report recently on the state of ABM and growth ABM, and I really believe in it. But yeah, how do you tackle personalization at scale, Jen? What's kind of your approach or even like mindset to this, if you don't want to get into the tactics?
Yeah, I think before you can even start with personalization, you have to start with smart segmentation, right? Because again, if you don't know who you're going after, you could personalize all day, but you're wasting you're wasting time, right? And I don't think that you need to personalize everything at the one-to-one level. And I think a lot of times when you are implementing an account-based approach at a company, there's a lot of excitement around it, like I mentioned before, and people think that it's going to be this like dedicated resource one-on-one for those target accounts. The reality is it's very hard to scale that, first and foremost, and two, you're missing out on a lot of other potential revenue opportunity if you're only looking at everything from like a one-to-one level, because again, it's very difficult to scale. But you can start to cluster accounts by vertical or industry, pain point, opportunity size, whether or not there's like a specific like white space, upsell, cross-sell play that you want to do within your current install base, and then start to create kind of like semi-custom content that really speaks to those different plays that you're trying to lean into. What's working really well, and what I've seen a lot of success in the past, is using things like, again, depending on budget and your tech stack, if you have something that can help create kind of a dynamic content hub, personalized video messages from sales, the more insight and intent and signals that you can serve up to sales for them to get even more personalized, because it's not just a marketing thing either, right? Like we do drive that forward a lot of the time, but there's also very critical sales component to that as well. So personalized video messages, targeted ads based on, again, those signals that we can pick up across first and third party data. And then as those accounts start to move further into the sales funnel, we start to open up opportunities. That's when you can start to, take a deeper dive and do more of that one-to-one approach, because now, who you're talking to, who else you need to talk to in the account, what their pain points are, what they're trying to solve for. And your personalization is going to go a lot further than you just kind of like putting a blanket message out there.
For sure. And I think that when people start ABM, potentially starting with one-to-one isn't the best way to pilot ABM, personally, in my opinion, because you're almost like putting all your eggs in one basket. The only way to scale it in theory is really just hire more people if you want to keep that true level of personalization. Whereas kind of what you said, smart segmentation is a great place to start. I agree with everything you said. Nailed it, Jen. See, it's not that hard, is it? Problem 6 that came in is, to be honest, the last 2 questions you've somewhat kind of touched on through the whole thing, but I'll ask this one. understanding where prospects and accounts are in the buying journey. Obviously, the question would be like, how has the buyer's journey evolved in the last couple of years, and how should marketers be responding to it? I've obviously got my own views on this, but I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So just from like, I guess off the top of the dome, Jen, like how do you see things playing out given the changes in the last few years?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that stands out to me is that buyers now kind of self-educate more than ever, right? They're doing a lot of the research on their own before they even go to your site and fill out a demo request form. They're talking to peers, they're going to communities to understand what's working, what's not, how are other people solving for that problem. They're engaging anonymously and jumping even between stages. So they might be in market 1 month, they might not be in market the next month, right? Because maybe something changed internally. Maybe there's a merger acquisition coming, or budget got cut, or they had to reprioritize based on other projects that they already had in the pipeline. So the buyer journey is very, very dynamic, and it's not a linear journey by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think as a marketer, whether you're doing account-based or demand gen with an account-based approach, you need to respond by being present to where those buyers are based on what they're researching, right? So not where you want them to be, but where are those watering holes that you can start to tap into. And so I think it means, serving up the right content with the right message at the right time. We've all heard that phrase multiple times throughout our careers, but also understanding when you're going to give them that kind of like ungated free value exchange versus asking for something upfront. And again, allowing them to self-educate. As a buyer of technology, 9 times out of 10, I have my preferred account-based marketing platform. I have my preferred content experience platform. I have my preferred map, etc. Right? So I'm going to probably go directly to those vendors if I, start a new role and bring them on, because I know what the product does. I know that it works well, and I know how to implement it internally. Doing anything aside from that is going to be a really hard selling point for anybody else to try to, come into the mix there. I think, again, because of that kind of like self-education and the loyalty that marketers do have, or even buyers do have around technology, it does make it more difficult, more challenging. But I think offering up those value exchanges at the right point of that buyer journey is going to be key.
Are you pro gated content, ungated content? Where do you stand with it?
I think it depends. Again, I think that it depends on the purpose of your campaign. If you're trying to generate leads, if you're like a lead-based business, then you're going to have some gated content here and there, right? But if you gate something once, why do you have to gate every single additional ebook on? If somebody's already opted in and given you their information in exchange for that content, you shouldn't force them to have to fill out a form every single time. I also think, again, it makes sense to know which assets you absolutely want to gate and which ones you want to just leave open for folks to engage with freely. And I think it depends on the purpose of the campaign, and what you're trying to achieve at any given stage.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, the purpose of, like, for me anyway, short form content or like posts on LinkedIn, like all that snippets are basically designed to drive you to a greater asset or a deeper like marketing asset anyway. So take Davis's or ForgeX's report, for example. I don't actually know if it's gated, ungated, or how it works. But yeah, like in theory, you could put out all that content. And I know a lot of influencers do it as well. They put out all their posts, but there's probably value in organizing all those posts together in a document which could be gated, by which time you've probably gained enough trust by so-and-so who's looking at your services.
I've done that too, Sam, where it's based on engagement, right? So maybe the very first content asset that you serve up to them after they click on an ad or, engage with an email, maybe the first couple of assets aren't actually gated, but maybe it's gated based on like engagement time or the number of assets that they've engaged with, right? So you, again, to your point, have that opportunity to build that trust before you're asking for that information exchange.
For sure. Failing that, you just integrate with our B2B and stalk the hell out of your users. Right, Jen, I will ask you one last question, which is, do you have a question for our next guest?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Any headaches at the moment?
I would like to know maybe what are the top sales plays that somebody is using that they're seeing a lot of success with, whether it's, a Wake the Dead campaign or a re-engagement campaign. I'm really curious to understand what sales plays are working and why.
Great question, because that will also help with alignment. You can bring the same best practices to the conversations. Jen, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
Yep. No, thank you, Sam, for having me. It's been a pleasure.